It was July of 1979 when Glenna Susan Sharp divorced her husband and relocated to California to be closer to her brother Don. At first, Sue rented a trailer because it was an affordable option, but she later moved into a house in the town of Keddie, which is situated in the Sierra Nevada mountain range. Living with her were Sue's children, John, Sheila, Tina, Rick, and Greg. On April 11th of 1981, Sue was at home with Greg and Rick while John was with his friend Dana. Tina was at the next-door neighbor's house when her sister Sheila arrived and told her that Sue wanted her back at the house by 10 p.m. Sheila then slept over the neighbor's house, a decision that would save her life. It's unclear exactly how the rest of the night unfolded, but Sheila left the neighbor's house the next morning at around 7 a.m. When she entered her own home, she discovered the dead bodies of Sue, John, and Dana. The three had each been tied up with medical tape and electric cords. Mysteriously, Tina was nowhere to be seen. The youngest boys, Greg and Rick, were unharmed in a bedroom. The neighbors with whom Sheila had spent the night retrieved the survivors from the house and called the police. An investigation soon began, and let me just say before I get into the details, this case is not for the faint of heart. You might want to click away before I describe the crime scene. Here we go. 2 bloody knives and a hammer were found at the scene of the murders. One of the knives was bent roughly 30 degrees, suggesting the attacker had been downright vicious. Sue's body was naked from the waist down, and she had been gagged with a blue bandana and her own underwear. Her chest contained a stab wound, her throat had been slashed horizontally, and the side of her head contained an imprint from the butt of a pellet gun. John's throat had also been slashed, but Dana's cause of death was strangulation, although he also had multiple head injuries. This was obviously an extremely gruesome slaughter, but the neighbors had heard nothing the entire night. That is, the neighbors with whom Sheila had been staying. A different neighbor reported having heard muffled screaming at around 1:15 a.m. However, they never bothered to check what was going on. Yet another neighbor, Martin Smart, soon became one of the lead suspects in the case. The sheriff who handled the investigation stated that Smart continuously gave the police clues that seemed to point the finger away from himself. During the investigation, a friend of Rick and Greg's was interviewed. The boy had been sleeping over when the attack had happened, but he gave the police conflicting stories. At one point, he claimed to have had dreams about the attack, then later claimed to have seen 2 men verbally fighting with John, Dana, and Sue shortly before the murders. This second story was told while the boy was under hypnosis. These composite sketches of the suspects were put together from that story. All of these details are disturbing enough as it is, but the lingering question remains: what happened to Tina? Sue, John, and Dana were all found dead in the house, but it seemed as if the killer or killers had taken Tina with them. Why had they done this, and where had they taken her? The why is still unanswered to this day. The where, on the other hand, was discovered by a bottle collector in a neighboring county about 100 miles away from Keddie. This bottle collector had discovered a human skull and part of a mandible, which were later confirmed to be Tina's. Near the burial site, a blue jacket, blanket, and a pair of jeans were found along with an empty medical tape dispenser. In the years following the murders, several suspects have been interviewed. Martin Smart, one of the first suspects ever identified, passed a polygraph exam in front of the sheriff. However, his own wife stated that she personally believed Martin was responsible. According to Marilyn Smart, Martin hated John with a burning passion. According to an article in the Sacramento Bee, Martin left Keddie and drove to Reno, Nevada shortly after the murders. He then proceeded to send a letter to his wife that mentioned having taken 4 lives. Martin's therapist also stated that he had confessed to the murders of Sue and Tina, but had denied any involvement in the deaths of John and Dana. The truth will almost certainly never be revealed. Martin Smart died of cancer in 2000, so if he truly is responsible, justice will never be served. In 2018, the police announced that DNA evidence from a piece of tape at the crime scene had matched a living suspect, but nothing further has come of this, at least not publicly. For now, we can only hope that this lead is followed by justice. This next case has a complex and very disturbing backstory. Let's start by describing the nature of a mother-daughter relationship that ended in tragedy. Kimberly Edwards was the daughter of Elizabeth Edwards and the sister of Katie Edwards. Kim and Elizabeth had a rough relationship from the beginning. When she was 6 years old, Kim was slapped by her mother during a fight. Following this, Elizabeth turned herself in to social services and her daughters were temporarily taken from her. Before long, she was given full custody again, and she hoped for a fresh start. Her relationship with Katie, the younger daughter, was much better than her relationship with her older daughter, something that Kim was always jealous of. On several occasions, Kim threatened to run away from home and even told social workers that Elizabeth had attempted to throttle her. Kim even went as far as writing a suicide note that Elizabeth ended up finding. She arranged a psychiatric assessment for her daughter, but it turned up nothing out of the ordinary. The fighting between Elizabeth and Kim continued, and at one point Kim even tried to commit suicide by overdosing on painkillers. Eventually, Kim began dating a boy named Lucas Markham. Elizabeth did not approve of Lucas, but Kim, of course, ran away with him. The couple was later found sleeping in a forest, and they returned home. Little did Elizabeth know that the couple was hatching a plot right beneath her nose. At some point during April of 2016, Lucas walked to Kim's house, where she let him in through a bathroom window. He entered Elizabeth's bedroom, placed a pillow over her face, and stabbed her over and over again in the neck. Elizabeth clawed and fought, but there was nothing she could do. Immediately after killing Elizabeth, Lucas entered Katie's room and murdered her while she slept. After their horrific crime, the couple went downstairs, had sex, and then watched Twilight while eating ice cream. When the police arrested and questioned them, neither one showed any remorse. In fact, the lead detective on the case described their casual attitude as almost unbelievable. Both Lucas and Kim are serving 17 years and 6 months in prison. A criminologist named David Wilson has stated that Lucas and Kim's behavior was psychopathic in nature, and Kim even exhibited egocentric thinking. She told the police that she wanted to kill her mother so that she wouldn't have to worry about Kim committing suicide anymore, and she killed her sister so that she wouldn't have to deal with the trauma of Elizabeth's death. In Kim's mind, she was helping her mother and sister by taking their lives. This case is remarkably disturbing, and in many ways, I wish Kim and Lucas were serving much longer sentences. Philip Fraser was a 25-year-old pre-med student who was planning on taking his course at Evergreen College in Washington State. Philip's parents were both physicians, so he was planning on continuing the family business. Unfortunately, his aspirations would never come to fruition. On June 14th of 1988, Philip departed from his home in Anchorage, Alaska in his car. He had packed everything he would need for the trip, including the 2 handguns that he legally owned. Philip experienced some car troubles during his trip, and he reached the Canadian-American border on June 17th. Little did Philip know that it was illegal for Americans to enter Canada with firearms. His weapons were confiscated by Canadian Customs, and he was allowed to continue his journey. Who knows? If Philip still had possession of his handguns, maybe he could have prevented what happened later. The next day, a cafe owner 600 miles south of the border saw a vehicle arrive at his establishment. A man got out of the passenger side door and the car proceeded to leave. It turned out that the man who exited the vehicle was a hitchhiker. The workers in the restaurant described him as odd and possibly mentally unstable. The owner said that he didn't want his daughter, who was working at the cafe that day, to be alone with the man. While the hitchhiker ate his meal, a different car arrived at the cafe. This vehicle belonged to Philip, who apparently looked as if he had misplaced something in his car. Eventually, the hitchhiker finished his meal, paid with Canadian money, and then left the establishment, approaching Philip's car. According to the cafe owner, Philip attempted to drive away before the hitchhiker could enter his vehicle, but the man jogged next to the car, opened the door, and entered while it was moving. For some reason, rather than making the man get out of his car, Philip proceeded to drive away with the man. This would prove to be a fatal mistake. 8 hours later, 200 miles further south, a couple pulled over when they saw a stranded motorist on the side of the road. This couple were Eddie and Pauline Olson, who offered to tow the man back to their house and let him sleep in their basement. The man apparently acted very nervous but accepted their offer. The next morning, the man told the Olsons that his parents were both doctors in Alaska and he was traveling to the United States in order to study medicine. Finally, before the man left, he paid the Olsons $20 for their hospitality. However, when he did this, he pulled out 2 wallets instead of just 1. According to the couple, the man was acting very secretively, but they couldn't place their finger on exactly what was going on. The man left to get his car fixed, and 12 hours later, Philip's car was found gutted and burnt at a car wash in Prince George. According to the police, everything had been removed from the vehicle before it had been set on fire. To this day, none of Philip's possessions have ever been found. Philip's body, on the other hand, was found roughly 70 miles away from the Olsons' home. The leading theory on this case is that the hitchhiker, whoever he was, murdered Philip after leaving the cafe and proceeded to assume his identity. Little did the Olsons know that they allowed a killer to sleep in their basement that night. It's unknown how long the hitchhiker used Philip's identity. For all we know, he could still be impersonating Philip to this day. Hopefully we will get some answers and justice before long.